Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me once again are my good mates, Sixties, and good to have him back. It's Clint, back from the holiday. Fellas, a lot happening in both the NRL and in Parradise, so we'll get to that shortly. But as always, before we talk football, before we talk shop, let's see how everyone's doing. And we've got a bit of volatile weather. It's wintry at times. It's very summery right now. But how's everyone doing in between, betwixt and between all that sort of stuff?
Mate, I'm doing really well. Looking forward to getting a few quick words from Clint about his holiday. But, mate, so much going on. This is going to be an absolute jam-packed podcast.
I'm going to be actually refreshing the news while we're recording because it's the sort of week where something big's about to break while we actually record.
Well, look, we know that by the time the podcast comes out tomorrow morning, we're recording here Wednesday night. By the time it comes out tomorrow morning, the full NRL draw will be out. We're going to talk about what we know, right, in terms of round one and magic round, that sort of stuff. But we made the decision to record now because so much has happened in the early part of this week. And we didn't really want to wait another day to get our podcast out there to be able to talk about some of these big issues in Parradise and in the NRL in general. It's just been an absolute jam-packed week, and we're only halfway through it. So looking forward to this podcast, fellas. And by the way, to our listeners, anyone that's whatever platform that you're listening to this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, that really helps to get our content out there to as many people as possible. We really appreciate too the people that are jumping on and catching this on YouTube as well. We'd really love to grow our content there, and we might be looking at a few different ways that we do the podcast in the future. But thank you to everyone who's jumping on board and watching on that particular platform. And also, before I throw to Clint, a shout out to our sponsor, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. We really appreciate their support. We should also mention if there's any other businesses out there that would be interested in partnering with the Cumberland Throw, we're more than happy to talk to you about tailoring a sponsorship package with us. Just get in touch with us. Let us know what you're interested in, whether you're a massive Eels supporter or not. We're more than happy to talk to you about a sponsorship package that can be tailored to suit the support that you're interested in providing. Clint, after all of that, I'm going to throw to you. Enjoyable trip, mate?
Oh, phenomenal. I love the United States. I love going over there. And my wife's got some family over there. We didn't see them this particular time. This is more a family trip on my side, which had the opportunity to spend certain parts of the trip with my dad and my sister and her husband over in the US. But it was absolutely phenomenal. I could very much live in certain parts of that country. I thoroughly enjoyed my time.
Absolutely great to have you back too, mate. We've missed you heaps, but we do have a show to get on with. So, John, I'm going to throw to you because we need to get stuck into that news.
News team, assemble!
Well, John, Clint, what can I say about what happened last night at Parramatta Leagues Club at the EGM? Talk about a farce, an absolute farce. It would be laughable if it were not for the fact that over $400,000 was wasted with this EGM that was basically forced upon the club. Let's be blunt about this, and I'm not going to go on the attack, but I want to be blunt still about this. Last night, the people who called for this extraordinary general meeting did not know one of the absolute basics, which was that there had to be 100 people in attendance for a quorum to exist. There was not 100 people there. They hadn't thought about that. And, you know, the panic stations went out when it was realised that there wasn't enough people there. There were people going into different lounges in the club looking to see if they could get people upstairs to add to the numbers. They had 15 minutes from 7 o'clock when the meeting was due to commence to have 100 people there. They weren't there, and as a consequence, the meeting was dissolved. Now, the voting numbers as they stood were heavily in favour, in favour of the existing directors, which meant that the vote was against the resolutions to get those directors removed from the board. And that was the wishes of the members. But here's what I am going to be highly critical here too, because if you think about this, the people that thought they could get the job done better or could find the people to get the job done better couldn't organise to get 100 people to the meeting. Let that sink in for a minute. The very first thing that you needed for that meeting, once it was called, was 100 people to be in attendance. That couldn't be organised. And I've seen some of them have a whinge about it and that the meeting should have gone ahead. Well, if they're thinking the meeting should have gone ahead, here's another thought to sink in. If the meeting went ahead, it would have been going against the Constitution. So, number one, they didn't understand the basics of a meeting. And number two, they would have wanted the current directors and the club to go against what's in the Constitution and hold the meeting anyway. That should send a message. But fellas, as I said, that over $400,000 that could be far better used in a whole lot of other ways, be it on member facilities, be it money towards the Parramatta Eels, because the Leagues Club is the owner of the Parramatta Eels. And all of this money that's spent, that can have a flow-on effect to the Eels if they needed extra funding. And I mean, the Leagues Club's involved in the Centre of Excellence, in the funding of the building of the Centre of Excellence. So they've got a financial investment in that.
Sixties, is the 400K a direct cost at this time? And it doesn't include indirect costs like the staff who would have had to work extra hours outside of their regular hours and things like that to support that?
Pertain to the mailing list, essentially, like all the media that needed to be sent out.
So that's just a direct cost. And then there's the indirect cost of the staff's time that was taken up with that. If you read Greg
Monaghan's letter to members today, he sort of intimates that the indirect cost and essentially the timing wasted by club resources was borderline farcical.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because you've got those direct costs. You've got other direct costs like the engaging legal people to look over the petition and the statement that went with it, just to see whether calling for an EGM was all met all the requirements that were there. You've just mentioned indirect costs like all the staff that are involved in just reading over things and making sure everything that was going out was following procedure. Now, it's here's what I'm hoping, fellas, moving forward, is that the people who continually look to the people, I'm talking about people from the past, who continually look to get onto the board, and even to this point of circumventing or going around that the normal processes at the AGM, where there will be directors who stand down every year. There are directors who stand down every year and have to be re-elected onto the board. And that's then the opportunity for other candidates. And they get like 8, 9, 10 candidates that also stand in that election in total. So there is a democratic process that's there where people can stand for a position on the board. And I just don't see why there's not thought into, look, if we're doing it this way, is this beneficial for the club in any way? And by the club, I'm mostly talking about Parra Leagues Club, but it also has a flow-on effect to the Eels as well. But if you're talking about causing the club to spend vast sums of money, B, dragging the club into the media for all the wrong reasons, C, creating some division between members and or supporters of the Eels. These are times when more than ever we need supporters and members to be unified in taking the club into the future. That doesn't mean that you have to be agreeing with every decision that's made, but there is a process that you can go through to get change. And if you're choosing a methodology, and let's face it, right, this methodology has been calling on players, legend players, and looking for their support, calling on people from the past and getting them on board. And all that does is create division. Right? It makes it a political divide from players from the past. We don't want players from the past to be taking sides in politics within the club. Like, that's the last thing we should be looking for as we look to march into the future. The club wants and needs to create a new future. We can embrace the heritage. And I'm sure that's the path that the club is taking. Embrace the heritage that exists, but create a new future. And there's so many things that are going on at Parramatta Leagues Club. There's going to be a lot of announcements made about what they are looking to do with the club and the precinct in the near future. There is such exciting times at the Eels with that centre of excellence and community centre that's being built at Kellyville. The way that the club is being built towards next season, there's so much to look forward to, so much to be unified on. And I hope that people can move on from this, and rather than continuing the divide, rather come together, because we're all Eels supporters. We want what's best for the club. Let's just come together and support the club and as far as Parramatta Leagues Club's concerned, the directors who are doing an absolutely brilliant job in taking the Leagues Club forward. Fellas, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add. That's my long editorial on the subject. I'm sure we could all talk more and, dig into how farcical this whole process has been. But I think it's time that we really start to move forward from now on.
Absolutely. My sentiments, I could sum up in a few words, 60s, because you so eloquently summated all of that, and very diplomatically, I might add, is that it's club before self every single time. And if you don't have that mantra, then there isn't a place for you at this club.
Yeah, absolutely well said, because that's really what we need from people who are in those sorts of director positions, is putting the
In
club
every
first.
position. In every position.
Yeah. And
Club before self.
and I'd yep. And we certainly believe that the directors of the club, Parramatta Leagues Club, have been doing just that ever since they took that role on. Because believe me, it's a lot of long hours that they put in, and they know that you're not signing up for anything other than giving plenty of yourself for a role like that. So anyway, as I said, let's get unified as members, as supporters, and let's take the club forward. Okay, moving on, fellas. Huge news, and I think you know how I feel about this. The Eels partnership with the Northern Territory government comes to an end after the 2025 season. I don't think I need to say anything more. I've been clear about that. It's been a success commercially. It's been a success from a community perspective. Like all that off-field stuff, massive ticks for both the Northern Territory government and the Eels. But football-wise, no, it had to end. John?
Yeah, we've spoken at this at length on the podcast. Everyone knows that we feel that we lose the Common for obviously feel we lose a pretty significant home advantage. It's not just losing home advantage; it's also the time of the season too. It tends to be at that juncture where you're trying to make a push, in the run to Origin. And yeah, it's not to say you can't celebrate all the positive stuff that's happened off the field with the community. And it will be interesting to see if the club does look to do something maybe more closer regional-wise in terms of taking home game away, or if they choose to just go back to their usual allotment of home games. Because I believe this will actually influence Magic Round moving forwards. I think we go into the pool of taking a home game to Brisbane for Magic Round if we don't have a regional game elsewhere. But yeah, a lot of, even for more recent tribulations, a lot of fun memories up in Darwin and Alice Springs as well, earlier in the partnership when we had the preseason trial there with the radio boys and the Drinkwater call for Scott Drinkwater back in, or was it Scott Drinkwater? No, it wasn't Scott Drinkwater, it was Josh Drinkwater, sorry, back in the day. But yeah, closing the chapter on this one, and we I suppose as another part of the Ryle sort of era, we move forwards with maybe more of a focus on CommBank.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think they'll probably end up with a New South Wales regional area. That's just my thoughts on it. Clint, any closing words about that?
Well, having spent some time in America, although I didn't go into a gospel church, I think they would summarize this as hallelujah.
Just wait until you get taken there as an away team, though.
Yeah, exactly right. But it's you've been banging on about this individually, both publicly and privately, 60s for the better part of the last 3 seasons. I think we all collectively even spoke about it even after the last big win we had there against Brisbane. I think that was in 2021. That you saw the sweat dripping off the players. It's like, this just isn't sustainable. Despite the fact that we'd won that particular game, you saw on a couple of successive losses after that, and the sides that we'd drawn up against them, it was a joke that we could call it a home game every year. The corporate arrangement, the commercial arrangement, and the community arrangement that you touched on, 60s, was where the real benefit was for the club. But in terms of the competition proper and trying to secure the 2 points, it just became untenable. And it's a positive that we're moving in a different direction.
Yeah, what I've always banged on about is every decision that's made about the team has to be towards assisting them in winning games.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that this was a decision which became one that was working in the other direction, because it wasn't just the challengers playing the game, it was the physical drain that took a toll around that game. So, again, it's now, after this season, it becomes the past. There is still this season to go, and hopefully we can end there on a winning note. Okay, the next bit of news coming out of the Eels was Peter Sterling as the official ambassador for the Eels Foundation. Now, the people might be a little bit unaware of the Eels Foundation. It's actually been something that the club has been looking to set up for some time, and it's been slowly put together. It's a shout out to Michael Basson, who was it was his baby to start off with, and it's now been taken forward. Belinda, who is from Ronald McDonald House, has become involved with the project. So she's just got this absolutely stunning background from in working with terrific charity like Ronald McDonald House, and it's coming to fruition at the club. And for people that are unaware, that look, the club website provides information about the Eels Foundation, but it's through things like the club's academies and pathways, through the football's facilities and infrastructure, which means also that centre of excellence and the community centre, and through social impact and community programs, that they're going to help the people with kids, with just in the community in general, to engage in programs that are going to help, are going to focus on mental health, respect, celebrating culture, and just generally getting kids active. So it's a great concept. It's just getting off the ground. People can donate to it. You can, as I said, you can go onto the Eels website. They've got plenty of information there about it, but you are going to hear more information about other ways that you can be involved in the Eels Foundation in a way that is maybe more than just a donation. So I won't jump the gun there, because there'll be news that's coming out about it, but I'm sure that there are ways that people can contribute, that when it's announced by the club, there'll be a great deal of interest in it for people who are passionate supporters for the Eels. Exciting times coming up with the Eels Foundation. Now, let's...
60, just before we go on, can we just emphasize the fact that donation is tax deductible? That's a tax deductible donation. So don't think that you're giving out of your hard earned. You can claim that back at tax time as well.
Yeah, a very important thing to note there, Clint. Thank you for that. And Sterlo being on board with it. I did a training report a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned about a visitor down there to Eels training, but I didn't name that person. Now, it was Sterlo, who I assumed that he was down at Eels HQ for something, but he popped out onto the training paddock, watched the boys go through their paces a little bit, was introduced to the playing group. But it's great to see a legend of the club like Sterlo getting on board, not just with the Eels Foundation, but making that connection with the playing group as well. John, there's the telly's reporting something going on with Mitch Moses in the club.
Yeah, sort of an hour before we go live in recording on Wednesday night, there's a report that the power brokers at Parramatta are working with Mitchell Moses to, erase, they're saying, but essentially just convert player clauses for 27 and 28, that's years 2027 and 2028, obviously, into just full-blown normal contract years, which will keep Moses at the club for, the next, is that 4 years now? 25, 26, 27, 28, yeah, another 4 years. So, common sense moves here. I know there's been, understandably, a lot being made of the player options given out in Parramatta contracts in recent times. Mitchell Moses was definitely prime among those. Although I would have argued that out of all the players that got player options, Moses had the most leverage, being a top 2 or top 3 halfback in the competition. So he sort of is afforded the right to maybe have a player option. But happy to see the club looking to try and convert that into a full-blown contract year. And I think there's similar motions happening with Dylan Brown, maybe not so far as in converting player options, rather taking up at least that first option of 3 years in his favour, and then getting the Eels to be set and forget at 6 and 7 for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Clint, what's your thoughts on what's happening there?
Well, you'd have to imagine that in trying to secure those extra 2 years, it would be an increase in pay versus what the option is available to Mitchell Moses at this point. But the fact of the matter is, you pay for that security, and Mitchell Moses, I think not just now, but probably in the next 2 to 3 years, will remain one of the most in-demand players in the game, given the scarcity of quality half. So it's within our interest to secure him as in the best way we can. I can only see this as a positive. It's likely come about as well because of some of the salary cap space that we freed up. We now have negotiation room, which we probably didn't have 3 or 4 months ago to make a move like this. And you'd imagine now that Jason Riles has started to get his fingerprints all over the squad, that this is the type of decision that he wants the football department to move forward with.
Yeah, and look, I think it's not just the contracts themselves; it's the way it's become fodder for the media. Like just constantly throwing up speculation and rumours about what's going on, and we don't need that sort of thing going on with the club moving forward. But speaking of contracts, Josh Addo-Carr, the Fox, officially became an Eel this week, and the very next day, straight into training and making his presence known. First of all, John, your thoughts about Josh officially becoming an Eel?
Yeah, it looks like a case of tipping our cap to the recruitment team here. Details have come out, and it sounds like they've driven a pretty hard bargain on Josh Addo-Carr. It's a 1+1 first year normal contract, second year club option. Monetary value seems to be on the more modest side as opposed to the initial talk of a bidding war with clubs like the Dragons and Tigers at the table. So it looks like Riles, O'Neill, and everyone part of that recruitment retention committee have done a really good job here. And Josh comes into the fold now, hopefully very hungry to prove himself. He's got that 1 year in the pocket with the club sitting on that second year. And I imagine that he'll be looking to rip in season 2025 and maybe secure an extension or the framework for an extension heading into 2026. So can't really complain about the nuts and bolts there. Well done to the club. And then, Josh, in terms of the presence in the team, 60s and Quint, anyone that was watching, I think Channel 7 and 9 both had coverage, but 7 had the better video coverage. It looks like Josh has sort of slipped in really nicely, bringing a lot of energy, good vibes, and sort of, a bit of energy that you want to see in the squad. You need a mix of all sorts of personalities, and Josh tends to trend towards the more exuberant, outgoing type, a real extrovert, and that's a good thing. He can help set the tempo and set the culture in that regard. And the only thing we now pray for is that he can just stay free of the injury bug that sort of dogged him on the field, and then keep himself with a clean nose off the field.
Yeah, that footage with Channel 7, I was fortunate to be shown that up at Kellyville when I arrived to watch training on Tuesday morning, and the Channel 7 crew were there, and I think they were hoping to be able to get maybe a chat with Addo-Carr as well, and just said g'day walking past, and then next thing I was being given an early screening of Addo-Carr in action out on the training track, and I think that was very early in the morning, like 7 or 7:30, that they were out there that morning. They did come out for a second field session a little bit later, which is what I had in my training report from yesterday. But the energy that he brought to the team there, and then, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but again with the session today, look, I don't know how he's got a voice left at the end of
Doesn't
each
shut
session.
up, just keeps yapping and feeding the
just-
boys. Yeah, you need those kind of guys in the team, don't you? Regardless of all the other sort of posturing stuff off the field, in terms of what he brings to the team there, it's obviously a big plus. One thing I'll say though is it took me a second. We knew for a while that the signing had a good chance of eventuating, and then obviously in more recent days it sort of really accelerated. But kind of like seeing Guffo in that Dragons jersey, it was a bit of a shock to the senses seeing Josh in the Parramatta polo. Just one of those ones where you'd seen him in other kits for so long. Seeing him in the Eels gear was a bit of a shock to the senses. But anyone that watched the signing video and his son and whatnot, they were very keen to get in there, and his young lad was very happy with the Parra kit. So, yeah, like I said, the big thing for me now is obviously off the field you want to see him on the straight and narrow, but on the field he can just stay there, stay healthy on the flanks, because right now if he is healthy and Zach is healthy, suddenly Mitchell Moses has two very different kicking options available to him in terms of the always contestable bomb to Zach Lomax from anywhere inside the attacking 50 to the more adventurous attacking kicks to Josh Addo-Carr. And that's on top of all the other stuff that they both bring to the table. So, yeah, really keen to see him being integrated into the fold through this preseason. We know that the staff are doing a fantastic job getting all those skills and sort of team vibes on the right track right now. And it looks like Josh is right at home in the blue and gold.
Clint, when you think about what the potential backline is at this stage, and there's a lot of the preseason to go, and there'll be some contested positions, but at this stage, you'd say that Iongi has been signed to play fullback. You'd be saying that Josh Addo-Carr will be on one wing, Bailey Simonson on the other, with maybe Sean Russell pushing there. You're looking at Will Penasini and Zach Lomax as the centres, and then Brown and Moses as the halves. And all of a sudden there is a different dynamic about the Eels backline. How does it leave you feeling about next season from that regard?
Excited, as I'm sure it does many Eels fans. There's so many different archetypes of players there who all have very unique individual strengths that can be honed and used collectively to really create some damage there. John intimated what Mitchell Moses might be feeling, and the kicking options that are now available to him. I think we've all thought about that since Lomax and Addo-Carr have signed respectively. The fact that we've got these attacking threats in these different positions as well only makes it easier, and I use that word flippantly, but it makes it easier for the other players in the back line, because naturally you think, the focal point of the attack on X edge is going to be Lomax. Well, suddenly more opportunities might open up for Bailey Simons and Sean Russell at all. Likewise for Will Penasini. If the defensive line's assuming that the ball's probably being worked to the edge to try scoring opportunity for Josh Addo-Carr. Now some holes that may not have presented themselves previously are available for Will Penasini, assuming that they're lining up on the left together, and Zach Lomax is taking his place at right centre. So, it's a very different looking backline to one that we fielded in previous years. And, I don't think it's too harsh to say this, boys, but we've kind of gone from a position where our backline was one of the weaker ones in the competition to now one of the stronger ones. And we've certainly turned an area of development into a bona fide, genuine strength, assuming that we play somewhere near our full capability.
Yeah, and that we avoid a year of the ridiculous injury toll that we had in the last two seasons. So I think that's going to be critical.
That's the big hanging point for me right now, is that I think our first choice backline is looking sharp. It's looking absolutely top 8 finals plus competitive tier sort of composition, but the depth is still a concern. Right now, you mentioned that full strength lineup 60s. I don't disagree with it. You can obviously argue about the best positional value whether Lomax should be on the wing and you slot Bailey into the centres, and then you avoid putting Will Penassetti onto the left and whatnot. But right now, it looks like Zach is going to be in the centres, Bailey on the wing, so you sort of just take that as it is. But you're looking at NRL experience beyond that. Sean Russell, your most capped backup back in that regard. Hayes Dunster, obviously, he's got plenty of caps to his name, but has struggled ever since that horrific injury. Joash Papali'i is going to be in the mix there too as well. But after that, you got Jake Tungor, you've got Arthur Miller-Stephen, you've got Richard Penasini. You've got a lot of guys without much experience to their name. Is the club happy with that?
Jordan Samrani.
Jordan Samrani has also joined the club too, correct? So he'll be in that same fold of unknown quantities, but guys looking to make an NRL debut. You want a group of young, hungry backs in the mix. Don't get me wrong. That is a huge part of not just succession planning, but the way you balance your top 30 and how you want to have different kinds of guys in the fold. But we're probably maybe one experienced NRL back short, maybe two, which it would help a lot in terms of if the injury toll really hits. But there is still space in the top 30. I don't know who's out there in terms of the right guy. I know we were linked to Tane Milne a while back now, and nothing's really happened on that front. So I'm not sure if that's an option. And Tane's, he's a colourful guy on the field. He has a real issue with the target area when it comes to defence. And he likes to spend a bit of time in the bin as a result. So while he's a pretty competent backup centre and winger, there's certainly issues that come with his package there. I don't know. I just think that depth is probably the one big thing right now. And you guys know me. I love having a youthful reserve grade team that is growing and developing and hungry. But you do need some NRL experience there. So that's probably the one area that I would like the club to hopefully address. But it's a case of you can only get what's out there, right? So you can't just say, hey, you need more NRL experience backs, go get them. The right guy's got to be there. So that's the one thing I'm going to monitor. But love the full strength backline. I like the young guys. I really want to see good, healthy years for both Arthur Miller-Stephen and Richard Penassetti in that regard. Ethan Martin too, another guy that we hadn't mentioned.
Yep.
Love to see him, being in the mix competitively. Plus, guys like you mentioned, 60s, Jordan Samrani could end up being a great acquisition by the club. He was a future Blue, I believe, when he was at the Cronulla Sharks, and then has been at the Dogs and certainly been good when he's been on the field, but just had that injury bug. So some really good young talent there. Just would like to augment it with a little bit more seasoning in terms of experience option.
Yeah, it will be interesting because you just mentioned Ethan Martin. He looks like he's bulked up a little bit.
There's a few guys in the pictures. Brock Parker's looking nice and beefy. So there's some guys that have taken their off seasons very seriously, it looks like, which is great to see. Yeah,
and from the other perspective, Junior's looking about as trim as I think I've ever seen him. He looks a lot leaner now. I thought last year that Junior had actually got down quite a bit with his playing weight, and I think he's probably going to strip even lighter going into next season. So it'll be interesting to watch that and to end up with some official numbers for the playing weights of some of the players, because there's definitely a move across the NRL for greater mobility, and the Eels seem to be focusing on speed and agility
Junior.
at the moment, doesn't it? And by the way, when I'm talking about the focus on speed and agility, strength work is still obviously a huge part of any NRL training program. But, there is that increased focus on speed and agility. John, just with regard to what you were saying about the experience, it probably is necessary because of the fact that you're talking about a number of players who would be, if there was injury issues, there'd be maybe more debuts than what the club might be comfortable with. But by the same token, what you'd also hope is that maybe there'd be a couple that get a taste of first grade by the end of the year.
Yeah, well, Josh Papali's
part of
coming for a shot at first grade. Like, there's no need to be coy about that. He came here to get a look in the NRL, and he'll be in the mix. So, yeah, there's certainly some young guys there that you're hoping, like you said, that by the end of the season will be not vets by any means, but have a taste of first grade and will know whether they can hit the ground running or not.
Yeah, and fellas, just very quickly touch on a training update. And before I do, I just want to commend to people, if you haven't been watching them already, or you weren't aware that they're on the Eels website, on their and on their various social platforms, there's been a great sequence of videos that have been put out about the Eels staff that have come on board. So you've had we had the big interview that happened with Jason Riles, obviously some time back, and we've just had the 3 assistant coaches there in Scott Wisemantle, Nathan Brown, Sam Moa, and today they released an interview with Blair Mills, who's head of athletic performance at the Eels, and he gave a little bit of background information which might then help to make sense of something that I'd held back a bit on in reporting on in my training reports, which was that there is less emphasis on straight line running in the conditioning work that they're doing. And I've had a couple of people starting to ask about, you haven't mentioned anything about this or that in relation to the conditioning running. And Blair Mills started to, in that video, he's talking about referencing GPS data. So when players are out on game day and they're wearing the GPS monitors, the same thing happens on the training track, and they can monitor not just distance traveled, but they can also monitor the output. Whether you're working to 90% of your maximum output, 80%, whatever the case may be. So they know what they're looking for in the work that's going on there. And someone like Blair Mills is constantly monitoring that data throughout the session and working out what the players need to be doing. And there's a lot of it in the conditioning that is, based in the drills and in the games that they're playing out there to push the fatigue levels through those sorts of activities. So you got a little bit of an insight into that from Blair Mills and his interview today. And maybe as a result of that, you might be able to read a little bit more into the training reports that I've been putting up. And just quickly, I'll touch on Josh Addo-Carr. I mentioned before about the energy that he brings out there today. And I said, I don't know how he's got a voice left. I can tell you one thing. If you can't spot him out there, and sometimes when there's 30-odd players out on the field, and you're trying to, and they're all wearing close to identical gear. There's no numbers on the jerseys or anything like that on the shirts. So sometimes you're trying to spot where a player is, and it takes you a while to work through the group to find where they are. He's there because you hear his voice all through the session. It's just like it's relentless, and it's like cheering on the the people that are in the group that he's working with. A lot of the drills that they're doing are competitive. So I'll tell you one thing, if any group wins, you know it, because the players enjoy celebrating a win over their teammates. But he really does particularly enjoy it. So he's made, he hasn't wasted any time in becoming a very definite voice out there on the training track. And you know what? Just watching today's session, the vibe that was out there with the players, they were just having, they were really enjoying the work that they were doing out there today, like really, really enjoying it. So, big tick for what's happening out there so far. Clint, there's, one of the things that I'm appreciating this year is that the Eels are moving towards more opportunities for fan interaction. John and I, while you've been away, we've covered the member, the open training session, which is on November 30 at Fairfield Showgrounds, and the Member Appreciation Day, which is at Eric Tweedle Stadium on December 14. This is a move in the right direction, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and it certainly is in alignment with the all club mentality ethos that Jason Riles espoused in his first interview and his first exposure to Eels fans. We're definitely seeing that visibility, and that's not to say that the door was closed beforehand, but everyone's being welcomed inside at this point. And I think it's an important part of building culture, and as Jason put so himself, that's an extension of building that culture is with the fan base, is actually introducing the staff and the people who are a part of your internal team and that are going to be working for supporters. So I think it's great that we've had these little videos and introductions into some of the key football staff. I'm sure we'll get a couple more. It'd be great if we continue to see that across all grades. I think that's something that I know that the three of us appreciate, but the wider supporter base absolutely appreciates as well, because you trust who you know, and helping the supporters get to know everyone, and not just the credentials that these people have for these roles, but a little bit of insight into their methodology breeds that trust and breeds that support. And that's how you build a culture, by welcoming people through the door. So I think it's a real positive.
Yeah, and there will be more supporter news coming out. It had been announced before, but there will be a fan forum that will happen early in the new year. The one thing that I will remind people of is when we have these events, you start to get into the thousands of people that will turn up, and it can be difficult for everyone to get every signature that they want for, when the opportunity's there to get players to sign something, and the club asks for cooperation with, via asking for just one thing to be signed. And I know it might be a challenge for people. They might think, look, this is the only opportunity that I get, and it's only two things or it's only three things that I want signed. But every little bit does add up. And having attended, I'm not one for getting things signed, but having spoken to people at these events and, who are at the back of the line, and, you can see that there are people who are taking a long time with players. They're getting multiple things signed. I think if we all work together and understand there's a lot of people there, then, more people are able to get that little period of that little bit of time getting something signed, or just having a quick couple of words with the players.
Can I just add a personal anecdote to that, 60s? While I was away, I had a good laugh in Florida my wife and I ran into a British couple there, and we're having a good laugh at the fact that American culture has a lot of wonderful things and a lot of wonderful qualities, but one of the ones that isn't so wonderful is their capabilities to queue. And we said to the British couple, you know what? The Commonwealth knows how to queue. And I think if we had the spirit of that in mind at these events, we'll do all right.
Yeah, absolutely true, mate. And I just want to quickly mention the junior reps preseason, that's underway. But I also want to direct people again once more to the Eels media, because they've got some information there on the structures of the representative programs and the key staff that are involved. So, look, I can only commend the media work that's being done by the club at the moment, because it's been all about providing information for people so that they are educated about what's going on, and there isn't any guessing about, does it operate this way or operate that way. So I'd ask you to head to the Eels official site. You'll see in the news section that there's information that's there, and if you want to know how the programs are structured and the key people that are involved in the programs, head to the Eels official media site. Okay, fellas, I think that just about wraps up, with one exception that we're going to touch on just quickly, because we'll also be touching on it in NRL news, and that is the Eels opponents for the opening round of the Premiership, and then also the Eels opponent for Magic Round. John, I'll throw it over to you for this.
Yeah, the full draw release we're expecting tomorrow, which obviously is the day after we record, so that'll go into the next podcast. But the two little snippets that have come out this week are the round one, like you said, and Magic Round. So round one sees, I think, the Eels travelling down to Melbourne, another chance to break Craig Bellamy's vaunted streak for Parramatta. And we're not pitching our own streak against the streak this time. So Jason Riles gets a chance to strike back at the former boss there. So we're going to set up a great round one clash there. Was that specified what day we're playing? I can't remember. But for Magic,
I think it was the Sunday afternoon.
Well, you're right. It's the final game of the round of round one. You're correct. That jolted my memory. By contrast, we close round one, but we open up Magic Round. So a big change for the Parramatta Eels after the last couple of years of either playing late on the Saturday or late on the Sunday. They get to open up Magic Round against the Cronulla Sharks. And this is an away game for the Parramatta Eels. So this will be a good one. A chance to open up Magic Round, play on a fresh surface, going up against a pretty reasonable opponent, but one that we can certainly match with on a talent basis at the very least. So really looking forward to that, and hoping against hope that maybe the draw is on the kinder side for us after a few years out in the wilderness for the Parramatta Eels. They've been in the...
Surely we're due.
We are overdue for a good draw in terms of strength of schedule and some of those other things that go into it, like 5-day turnarounds and this dispensation between like Friday nights and whatnot. So keen to see what plays out tomorrow, but the two snippets we got, not too bad. I know round one in Melbourne's tough, but a great way for Jason Riles and his boys to cut their teeth in that new regime.
Clint, what's your thought on that opening round game against the Storm?
Bring it. Bring it. We should be excited to go down there and be the team that finally breaks this. I'm sick and tired of hearing about Bellamy's perfect record. Let's be the team that breaks it. We should be excited. We've got a whole off-season and pre-season to prepare for it. We can go down there, hopefully with our best squad, taking the field and give it a real red-hot shake. Let's give it everything. That's my attitude.
Yeah, look, I think so as well. I think from my perspective, it's almost a free shot. No one's going to expect.
Very much so.
Nobody's going to expect the Storm to lose, because they just don't lose, and the expectations on the Eels will probably be low. As far as I'm concerned, it's a free shot. So, looking forward to it, mate. Looking forward to it, and I think there's probably some plenty of Eels supporters that will have booked a flight to Melbourne for that first match of the season. So exciting for those people, and hopefully the Eels bring a win for their travel that they put in. John, it's your time, mate.
Yeah, the intermission music up here now. I was trying to find a weekly theme and had the EGM and whatnot, so I was poking around for something that fit. Found a little group called Quorum a cappella, which obviously fits pretty nicely, and they had a pretty good song that probably fits the motif moving forwards. One for the copyright algorithm on YouTube, obviously, but I think that's a nice thing moving forward. Time for people just let it be.
John, what an inspired choice. Clint and I have no idea what you're going to throw at us intermission music wise, and there I was at the start of the show talking about let's just get everything together, leave the past behind, all that sort of stuff, and out you come with the Let It Be. So, and for me as a Beatles fanatic, if this quorum group had come up with a version of Come Together, that might have been just as inspired as well. So now we move on to the NRL news. And fellas, Terrell May is now officially a West Tigers player.
Yeah, it's a lot of speculation was out there about whether the Parramatta Eels be interested, St. George, Luai Dragons, and the West Tigers are the ones to step up. We spoke about it 60s while Quint was on holidays. I'm not sure if you were following this one, Quint, but Terrell May, as our fans will know, sensationally let go of a contract that he signed this year with the Sydney Roosters. 2 years, just under $1 million total. So it was not too bad value for him there. Obviously good value for the Roosters. There's been a whole raft of rumoured issues. There's some unsavoury allegations that we never spoke about for good reason. There was talks about motivational concerns by the Roosters. Apparently Tyrell had either given up or considered giving up the game twice in his young career. So whatever it is, there was something that all clubs had to do due diligence on. The West Tigers are obviously comfortable with what they found, signing him for 3 years. I think it's approximately $2 million, so $666K per annum thereabouts. So certainly a step up on what he was on at the Roosters. He is a talented player, and if he stays on the field motivated, I think the Tigers will be happy with what they signed him for. But in saying that, that whole process, it just felt like there was something under the surface, kind of like a duck, right? It was just sort of cruising on top, and underneath there was a lot of thrashing frenetically that we as fans were not privy to, because the fact that the Roosters let him walk in a year where they've lost so many star players, it sort of made you go, what's going on there?
You know what? It made me think that, and then I was reading more of what Adrian Pashenko had to say on it, because he brought out the article in the first place, and I thought, there's if I'm a club and I'm reading it, I don't know if what was in that was in any way a red flag, because if you balance it up to how he played didn't seem like a player who didn't have motivation. And on top of that, he was involved in the postseason matches as well. So, I think to myself, I think the Tigers might have picked up a good one here.
Big recruitment drive for them, though, wasn't it, Quint? On top of Terrell May, who we'll get your opinions on shortly, Jerome Luai, Turuva, Skelton, and Jack Bird. That's the one I'm always forgetting. And I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone else, but a lot of new faces there. And I know they've lost Stefano Utoikamanu and Josh Isaiah Papali'i, sorry, Ice, which are big losses to their pack, but they've certainly gone out there and found some replacements.
I mean, Clint, if you're a Tigers supporter, are you buoyed by what the potential might be next season?
You're at the very least cautiously optimistic. There's still a lot of water to pass under the bridge, and the fact of the matter is, every year there is a couple of teams that drop out of the 8, a couple that obviously ascend to take their place. There's a couple of teams who you go, geez, they perform that badly, and then there's a couple of teams you go, wow, they perform that well. And the fact of the matter is, I think outside of 3 clubs, the remaining 14 teams can be any one of those. So you're cautiously optimistic. The right ingredients seem to be there, but let's see if a cake comes out of the oven.
Yeah, absolutely. John, is it any major surprise that Ryan Pappenhausen has decided to extend at the Storm?
No, what was surprising was the Canterbury Bulldogs' interest. Phil Gould had flown down to Melbourne in order to try and woo Pappenhausen ahead of what is not official, but it's expected that he's going to sign a 1-year extension with the Melbourne franchise, which now leaves Melbourne in an interesting sort of state of balance between Pappenhausen, who is not inked a long-term deal, and young Far Longlaw, who has a longer-term deal in place but would be a free agent if Pappenhausen signed. I'm not sure what the parameters are because I don't think this actually invokes his free agency clause. If Pappenhausen had signed a multi-year deal, I think Far Longlaw can then go to market. So really difficult balancing act here for Melbourne and Craig Bellamy, but it looks like they're going to keep their star fullback for at least one more year. And the Bulldogs, yeah, they continue to be active on the market, which is really interesting. I don't know if they're going to look to back-end a deal or make it work some way like that, but they Phil Gould is aggressive. A year does not go by where he's not looking to actively reshape that roster.
Yeah, you wonder how they're able to make it work. Obviously they do, but really aggressive at the top end of the market too. Clint, I guess it wasn't any surprise to you that he stayed either.
No, I mean, it kind of felt like a fait accompli. You get the feeling that if he was going to go this year, there probably would have been some more active suitors in it, and that's irrespective of his injury history. You know, the fact of the matter is, when a player of his quality becomes available, everyone's interested for the right price, and the Bulldogs were obviously pushing the issue, but it always just had that sense of he wasn't actually going to go anywhere. So to me, it's not a surprise.
Okay, fellas, now we're going to talk about the fuller NRL opening round and NRL Magic round, because what I'm interested in from both of you is, are there any matches, apart from the Parramatta ones, obviously, but are there any matches that really grab your attention or have you looking in anticipation towards what it looks like? I've got my thoughts, especially around Magic round, but I'm curious. So, John, if you can go through each of those rounds, and we'll have a look at whether there's any particular matches that stand out for us.
Yeah, so the season kicks off with round 0, which is obviously an abridged part of round 1, and that sees the Canberra Raiders and the New Zealand Warriors opening up the Allegiant Stadium. Is it a quadruple header now? I believe there's 2 other games attached to it this year between the Super League and then I think Women's Rugby League as well. They start off at 11 a.m. Out at Allegiant Stadium, which is in Las Vegas, and that's followed up by the reigning premiers, the Penrith Panthers, taking on the Cronulla Sharks at 3:30 p.m. And that will take place the week before round 1. And, well, kind of, it is a week before, just that Sunday to Thursday jump's only half a week. So then the round 1 proper kicks off with the Roosters hosting the Brisbane Broncos. Big one there. A lot of turnover for the Roosters. New coach there for the Broncos, 8 o'clock p.m. at to be confirmed stadium. They're all to be confirmed, actually, the round 1 venues, which you think the Roosters are out at Allianz. Let's not overcomplicate things. Followed up by the Friday doubleheader, which is the Tigers and Knights in the pub slot This is the Tigers' home game, followed by Redcliffe and the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Well, that's a big one, isn't it? Wayne Bennett. They certainly lined that one up for the primetime slot on Friday. On the weekend, it's the Dragons and the Bulldogs, 5:30 p.m. there. 7:35 p.m. sees the Seagulls hosting the Cowboys, and the Parramatta Eels, as you so well said, Clint. Well, they're on their lonesome actually because of the split round. They're not in the that 6 o'clock slot, thank God. The 4:05 lone Sunday game. Eels going to Melbourne to take on the Storm. So, a couple of big games there. A couple of less than interesting games, I think. But obviously, Parramatta that's a cracking game there. The big Bennett Bowl between the Dolphins and the Rabbitohs is huge. The two pin-up clubs there in the Roosters and the Broncos are going to be fascinating to see how they handle their respective off-seasons. Turmoil for different reasons at both clubs there. But, yeah, some big round one fixtures there, boys. And, of course, the bye, that legendary round one bye, that goes to the Gold Coast Titans this year. So I'm not sure which of those games is your pick for round one, but we'll go for that before we go to Magic Round.
Clint, what's your picks?
I mean, beyond our own game, it's hard to go past the Bennett narrative that will obviously be all spoken about once Vegas is done and dusted. That'll be the talk of the town for round one. But look, I'm above all else just excited to see if and how the NRL grows on its Vegas venture from 2024. Obviously, there's more fixtures, but the real indicator of success will be viewership and crowd attendance. I'm interested to see the promotional material and marketing material that they use in order to drive that attendance and that viewership. We had some opinions about how they went about it, both positive and lukewarm, and then there's some negative in there as well about how they did that this year. I'd really like to see them capitalize on the goodwill that they created and break further into that domestic market.
Yeah, I'm interested in it as an event, and as you mentioned, all the promotion and marketing that goes on around that, rather than the actual clashes that are there. They're not normally matchups that get my attention. Probably, I am curious about the Bennett Bowl that you've discussed, but also I am interested in what transpires between the Roosters and the Broncos, because you've got a Roosters team which is strangely quiet in what's been happening in terms of their recruitment. Been a few departures, but yeah, I worry a little bit about what might happen in terms of their war chest that they're building up there. But they've still got quite a lineup there. What's going to happen up in with the Broncos? Because their last year was just in a season where they imploded, and it hasn't got any better since the season's ended. Can they start the year on a positive, or especially under a new coach? And I guess the Roosters will be a fair litmus test for where they're at, because look, things haven't gone too well for Madge as a club coach in his last couple of appointments, and by that I mean the end of his time at the Rabbitohs and his entire time at the Tigers. So he's proven that he can coach at representative level. I think his style of coaching is what's needed in the short term at the Broncos, but I'm obviously very curious as to what's going to happen in round one in that clash. John, can you take us through Magic Round? Because, again, maybe more so with this, to be honest, I was a little bit nonplussed about the matches. They didn't really grab me.
Just before we jump the Magic Round, one note of order that's important for the Parramatta Eels. We've spoken a lot about Josh Addo-Carr. Understandably, he won't be available in round one, fellas, serving that 4-game suspension for what happened at Canterbury that led to his contract being torn up. But it is worth also considering that He served 1 game for that suspension at Canterbury. And I believe it flip-flops every year, but I do believe that the All-Stars game will count towards his suspension toll as well. So he will be back in action round 3 is what I'm expecting for the Parramatta Eels. So depending on how that draw plays out tomorrow, we'll know who his opponent is for his Eels debut. But moving on to Magic Round, and we mentioned the Eels kicking this one off. They're in the pub slot on Friday night, taking on the Cronulla Sharks, followed up in the doubleheader by the Roosters and Dolphins, probably one of the better games in that spread, Friday, 8 o'clock p.m. Moving on to Saturday, and the day starts with the Rabbitohs and the Knights. That's another Bennett Bowl too, actually, although obviously Bennett's tenure at Newcastle is now pretty long removed. They start at 3 o'clock p.m, followed up at 5:30 by Warriors and Cowboys. Finishing up the Saturday action is West Tigers and Dragons. Then on Sunday, with the ground all torn up, the Titans and Bulldogs kick off at 1:45 p.m. And then you've got the 2 other games being Panthers, Broncos. That's another big one there. Followed up by Storm and Raiders, which, you know what? The Raiders have sort of taken it to the Storm in recent years. So Storm, Raiders, Panthers, Broncos, Roosters, Dolphins probably jumping out for mine as the 3 game. And obviously the Eels too, because the Eels Cronulla should be a good game. I think half the docket's not bad, but the other half with 60s is kind of how you're doing.
Yeah. Clint, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, not too dissimilar there. I mean, I tell you what, if you're a Cowboys fan, you're pretty happy with drawing the Warriors as an away side, the away side being the Cowboys there, because you've avoided a trip to New Zealand. You only have to have an hour-long flight down to Brisbane instead in familiar Queensland weather as well. Selfishly, from a Cowboys perspective, I think you're very, very pleased with how this Magic draw has panned out. Yeah, much like you guys. I mean, you know, the Panthers Broncos probably is going to be the game of the round, or what you'd anticipate would be the game of the round. Additionally, you know, and I'm being a little biased here, I think our own Eels and against the Sharks will be a spectacle for the neutrals as well. But yeah, much like you've already said there, I'm very meh whatever to the rest of the clashes. You know, I probably have an eye on some former Eels players to watch in other teams to try and make it somewhat interesting to watch. But outside of that, I'm not too fussed about the rest of the games.
Yeah, look, I'm not. But you know what? A lot of people like to get there for, again, like the Vegas situation, the event, and being able to see games they might not normally watch live, teams they might not normally watch live, and in an environment that's like a festival. So good luck to them. Hope you enjoy it if you're heading up to Brisbane for Magic Round. Finally, fellas, I'm just going to finish off. John and I were talking about a couple of the injuries to the Penrith players in Edwards and Talangi, and the ladder jet procedure that was being done on the shoulder. And we were saying it's all of a sudden, it just seems like that's a term that's we hadn't been familiar with before, but like the Liz Frank injuries, it's maybe going to become a term that we might hear more of. And in response to our podcast last week, John, I was receiving videos that were put out by the NRL physio that our listeners were sending through to me. And I want to send a special thanks to Lockie, who also added a description that I want to read out to you. So for people who are interested in that injury and procedures with particular injuries, I'll read out what Lockie sent through to me. Basically, with dislocations, they can result in damage to the soft tissue structures that make up your shoulder joint. Unlike, say, a hip joint, your shoulder is more like a golf tee that is stabilized by multiple tendons and ligaments. So they're taking the short head biceps muscle and the bone it attaches to and sewing over the point of damage / instability to shore it up. The problem with procedures like this is that there's significant chance of damage due to the remodeling and healing that goes on. So hence you need to give it plenty of time without loading. Like, I guess, and he's talking about weightlifting, mechanical tension, and blunt force contact. So plenty of time without loading and blunt force contact. So there's a bit of an explanation about that injury and what lies ahead for a couple of those Penrith players in their rehab. So thanks again to Lockie for that information. And fellas, after that, I know you're going to be experts on the ladder jet procedure.
Thanks to Lockie indeed. Always fascinating to get that kind of insight into the mechanics behind injuries and what, then leads to the rehabilitation process. A reminder of what these guys are putting their bodies through daily and weekly for both themselves, the clubs and fans. And obviously with Penrith, it's going to be once you do your shoulder, it can be a bit of a lingering issue for some players. And it's definitely something to monitor if it does pop up again for both Edwards and Talangi, especially for Dylan, who's a superstar fullback in the game.
Yeah, and look, you know what, the thing is, we're so fortunate here, fellas. We talk about something on the podcast, and invariably we get answers. So if we don't have the answers, we'll just put it out there as a question on the podcast. And we've got such great listeners and knowledgeable listeners that they provide us with the answers, as Lockie did this time. So that just about brings us to the end of the podcast. John, any late breaking news at all?
I mean, keeping on top of it, and I'm fairly confident there's nothing big. I'm just looking. There is one story actually developing, and we mentioned that Phil Gould is very competitive and always in the market for a signing. He's missed out on Ryan. Ryan Pappenhausen, so the play that we'd sort of put together as a potential candidate for them to shop in previous podcast 60s is now right in their crosshairs as they look to move on to Ben Hunt and throw their hat into the ring between the Sydney Roosters and the Brisbane Broncos for the Queensland and, former Australian star who is, probably better at dummy half but prefers to play halfback, and they do have a need in the half still. They haven't been able to really lock down that partner to Matt Burton. They use Toby Sexton this year to, later in the year after using Hutchinson, I believe, before that. So haven't been able to really lock down a partner to Burton, and Ben Hunt would certainly free up the rangy 5'8" to focus more on dominating of the ball in hand and rather than organising. Definitely something to watch, I suppose, but as the sort of the contract battle really starts to liven up, it'll be interesting to see where he lands because Roosters have a real need. The Broncos, strictly speaking, have lesser need. It's more around Ezra Mam's impending suspension, depending on how big that is. But the Broncos also a club that he has a lot of ties to. So who's going to win that battle for his signature between the Bulldogs, Broncos and Roosters?
Yeah, interesting times for those clubs. Well, fellas, as I said, that just about brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you to both of you for your fine efforts this evening. Thank you to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Thank you to our listeners, wonderful listeners who not only provide the feedback that keeps us motivated going forward, but also provides us with the answers, as Lockie did tonight. So thank you to our listeners for tuning in once more. Our numbers on TCT this month have just been phenomenal, and that doesn't include our podcast listens, which is amazing in itself. But fellas, I'll just let you in on a little bit of information on that. We've moved past the numbers for the best ever November in our history with something like 11 days to go in November. So we've already set a new record with 11 days. This is for site visits, with 11 days still to go to set a new number. It's just absolutely phenomenal. thank you to all the people who read and listen to the Cumberland Throw, because, yeah, it just, in a year that's been a tough year, for us to get the sort of numbers that we're going to end up posting by the end of the season, it'll just be phenomenal, and we can't thank you enough. And again, as well, congratulations, and it's terrific news that the directors of Parramatta Leagues Club, the members stood in support of them in this EGM. As we said, the EGM did not get off the ground on the night, but the voting numbers were already there. So, thank you to the people who voted, and congratulations to the directors who can continue on with their fine job. And fellas, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.